So my husband, Andy, he passed away April 2021 from melanoma. He was only 33 years old when he was diagnosed. We discovered it far too late. We discovered it when it was already stage 4 and he had tumors all over his body. So we received that call that everyone is afraid of getting from the doctor. And that memory will never leave my mind. It's a very vivid image of his face when he heard the doctor on the speaker telling him that there's tumors all over his body. And we have 2 little kids. Our daughters were 4 and 2 when that happened. And when we got that call, we both knew what this meant. We knew that he probably wouldn't survive. But we had no idea the journey that this was going to take us on. It was 3.5 months of absolute torture. He died only 3.5 months after that phone call. And it was brutal. He did not have a single good day. He was sick every single day, whether it was nausea, vomiting, pain, exhaustion, confusion, imbalance. The cancer destroyed his body, and there was nothing I could do about it. I watched him suffer and literally waste away before my eyes, as well as watching him take his last breath. So when Andy was diagnosed, we, of course, had a massive influx of help and support from family, friends, the fire department, and just the fire family in general, not just Andy's department, but the entire county showed up for us and offered help. And that was probably the most moving part of all of it, was the impact that the fire service had in our lives and how much they cared and wanted to help, even if they didn't know Andy. There were a lot of departments that stepped in and put on a parade for my daughter for her 4th birthday and donated money to us and helped out with fundraising. It was unbelievable. And Andy always told me that if anything were to happen to him, we'd be taken care of by the fire family. And he was absolutely right. And even the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, it's an incredible foundation that I'm so grateful that it exists, because they made a huge impact on us as well. The second they found out about Andy's diagnosis, they stepped in, provided a huge box that I still have of resources, and they provided me a mentor, someone who's been through this before, another wife, and she was a huge help. And just having that available from people who've been through this before, who know what we're going to be experiencing, it was very comforting. So when people hear about a story like ours, if they haven't been affected by this type of tragedy before, it's usually like, oh, wow, that's so awful, that poor family. But, time will heal their wounds and they'll move on and she'll remarry or whatever. And then their life goes on. But people don't really realize the complex impact that something like this has on a family unless they've been through it themselves. And even I was extremely naive to it before all of this happened. So when Andy knew that he was going to die, he was not afraid of dying. The thing that just wrecked him, that brought him to tears, was knowing that I was being left behind to manage this life by myself and raise our girls by myself. And that alone completely broke his heart. And I don't know how many times he cried over that, just the guilt that he had, knowing how much was going to get put on my plate and how much trauma and damage and pain that I would have to be left with when he left. And he didn't even know the extent of how bad it was going to be, because he never went through something like that. But I can say that it is far beyond what anyone can imagine with how brutal this is. And I don't mean for this to be a sob story in any way. I just want people to understand how deeply this impacts a family when somebody dies, especially somebody young that shouldn't have died. I lost my husband. My girls lost their dad. You know, his mom lost a child. His brothers and sisters in the fire department lost their friend and their family and their brother. Like, this is not something that we're all just going to get over and move on from. It is just so deeply rooted in every aspect of my life. He was everything. He was the breadwinner. He was my best friend, my therapist, and the amount of everything that's been left. I have a hard time even explaining how complex it is. I mean, they call it grief for a reason. We don't call it sadness when somebody dies, because it's so much more than sadness. That is just the tip of the iceberg. Grief is its own complex monster, and it seeps into every aspect of my life and my girls' lives, that I have to carry their grief for them as well. And how exhausting this life is, doing everything. 95% of my life is on my shoulders. Every decision I have to make, whether it's making lunch, what am I going to make the girls for lunch today, versus should I pay $1,000 for new tires on my car, and what tires should I get? I don't know. Like, it's exhausting coming up with all these answers and decisions all day long, every day, because I have no one to bounce them off of. I could write a whole novel about the complexities of grief and widowhood and the loss of my young best friend and father of my children, that I could, have a whole nother talk about. But I just want people to understand that it is people's worst nightmares for a reason. And if you think that you're invincible and it's not going to happen to me, or well, I've been in the service 20 years, I'm screwed anyways, like, what's the point in even trying to help myself? Either way, if you're not going to do it for yourself, think about what you're leaving behind. Think about the damage and trauma that will be left behind when you die. And if there's something that you can do to prevent that, do it. Get a skin check. Get that biopsy. Go to the doctor. Take care of yourself. Get good sleep when you're home. Like, feed yourself good food. Don't drink so much. All the typical things that are in the fire service that everybody struggles with. And my husband did too. That's just part of the culture. But just try for your family, because no one deserves to deal with what I'm dealing with. And Andy deserves to be here and watch his children grow up. And my girls are not even going to really remember him because they were so young. And it's so unfair in so many ways that I want my foundation to try to encourage this change and keep you guys around for your families, because I know what your spouses are going to have to deal with if you die. So I have started the Andy Valenta Melanoma Foundation in honor of my husband, and it is aimed to provide skin checks and skin cancer awareness to fire departments. Andy died from melanoma. He was an otherwise very healthy individual. He had no predisposition to this other than being a firefighter. So every other firefighter out there has the same risk, if not more, in some departments. So I want to make a difference, at least with that type of cancer in the fire service. Firefighters are at risk for so many different types of cancer, but this one is the easiest one to screen for and the easiest one to treat if it's caught early. So a lot of departments don't already provide annual skin checks to their men and women. So my foundation will come in and provide those skin checks and also provide education and awareness to try to make a difference and save some lives. If there's interest in getting a skin check from the foundation, you can go on the website, avmelanoma.org, and you can contact me through there, and we can get started on planning the skin check for the department.